The snow had just started falling softly across the north when a raven arrived in River Run. Robb Stark stood by the window, reading the letter again and again, his jaw tight and his eyes burning with quiet anger. The letter was from his mother, Catelyn. She had written it in haste, her words shaking with fear. Walder Frey was planning something dark. She had heard whispers, servants talking in corners, guards shifting nervously when asked simple questions. The upcoming wedding between Edmure Tully and Roslyn Frey didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a trap. Catelyn begged her son to trust her instincts and delay the wedding, or at least come prepared. Robb didn't hesitate. "Get the men ready," he told his bannermen. "We ride for the twins, fully armed. But it's a wedding," one of them said cautiously. "No," Robb replied, his voice cold as winter. "It's a battlefield dressed in flowers." Meanwhile, far in the south, Ned Stark had escaped death. In this version of the world, Varys had secretly smuggled Ned out of the Black Cells before Joffrey could order his execution. With the help of a few loyal men in the shadows of King's Landing, Varys got Ned on a ship heading toward White Harbor. From there, he moved quietly across the north, hiding his face, avoiding Lannister scouts. By the time he reached River Run, Robb had already ridden to the twins. Ned met Catelyn in her private chambers, and she cried when she saw him. She thought he was dead. Everyone did, but the old wolf had returned. "I couldn't let my son face this alone," Ned told her. Catelyn quickly told him everything. The warning signs, the uneasy silence, the way the Freys acted like hosts but looked like hunters. Ned nodded. "We prepare for war, not a wedding." 2 days later, outside the gates of the twins, Robb arrived with his men. But this time he didn't come blind. The Stark forces stayed outside the keep, camping with full armor and sharpened swords. Robb walked into the hall alone, with only Grey Wind by his side. Catelyn followed later, with Ned by her side, hidden under a hood. Lord Walder Frey stood at the center of the great hall, pretending to be cheerful, pretending to welcome the king in the north. But when he saw Ned Stark walk into the room, alive and armed, something shifted in his face. "You were supposed to be dead," Walder sneered. "And you were supposed to be a loyal bannerman," Ned said. "Yet here we are, both disappointing expectations." Suddenly, every Frey soldier in the hall reached for a weapon, but so did the Stark guards hidden among the crowd. They had slipped into the wedding in disguise, and now swords rang out, filling the hall with chaos. Robb shouted, "Protect Edmure! Secure the exits!" Grey Wind leapt forward, tearing through 2 Frey guards before anyone could react. Arrows flew. The tables turned over. A knife nearly struck Robb, but Ned blocked it with his sword, his face grim but calm. "I thought I lost you," Robb said to his father, even as he fought. "You almost did," Ned replied. "Let's not waste the second chance." Within minutes, the Freys were overwhelmed. The Stark men had been ready, and the Freys had underestimated their spirit. Walder Frey tried to flee, but Catelyn caught him herself, blade in hand. "For my son, for my family," she whispered, and it was over. Outside the keep, Stark banners waved proudly in the cold wind. The Red Wedding had turned into the Red Reckoning. Robb stood beside his father, looking at the dead around them. "We were lucky." "No," Ned said, "we were prepared. And now the real war begins, because the Lannisters would hear of this, and they would not be pleased." News of what happened at the twins spread like wildfire. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to fear. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister sat alone in his chambers, rereading the letter brought by Raven. His plan had failed. Walder Frey was dead. The Stark boy was alive. Even worse, Ned Stark. The man Tywin believed long buried under the sept of Baelor was back, breathing and fighting. He crushed the letter in his hand and stood up. Pacing, "They've made their move," he muttered. "Now it's time we make ours." Back in the north, Robb Stark's camp outside the twins was quiet, but not at rest. Soldiers trained harder. Scouts rode out in every direction. Everyone knew the Lannisters would strike soon. In Robb's war tent, a meeting was underway. Ned stood at the head of the table, his grey eyes sweeping over the men. Beside him, Robb listened, but this time he didn't lead alone. His father had returned, and with him came experience, discipline, and a reputation strong enough to rally the North once more. "We have two choices," Ned said, pointing at the map. "We wait for Tywin to come north and bleed him in our land. Or we strike first." Rose Bolton spoke up from the shadows. "My lord, the Riverlands are ours. If we strike now, we could trap Tywin between the Trident and Harrenhal." Robb shook his head. "We can't trust Bolton." Ned raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because I made the mistake of trusting him before," Robb said. "I named him Warden of the North when I thought Theon had taken Winterfell. He stood by my side, too quietly. I never felt his loyalty." Ned stared hard at Rose. The man's face gave nothing away. Cold, calm, dangerous. "If there's even a shadow of doubt," Ned said. "We don't give him power again." Rose didn't argue. He simply nodded and backed away. "I suggest we strike Harrenhal," said Catelyn. "If we take it, it becomes the perfect fortress to command the Riverlands and block the Lannisters from moving freely." Robb looked at his mother, then at his father. "It's bold. It's necessary," Ned said, and so the plan was made. But war wasn't just fought on the battlefield. It brewed in hearts, whispered in dark corners, and waited behind friendly smiles. That night, as the soldiers rested and the banners fluttered in the wind, Ned stood alone by the fire. Robb approached quietly, noticing the stiffness in his father's shoulders. "You're thinking of Jon," Robb said. Ned didn't reply at first. Then he sighed. "I should have told him the truth. About his mother?" Ned nodded. "There's much he doesn't know. Much the world doesn't." Robb looked into the flames. "Do you think he's safe?" "If he's anything like you, he'll survive worse." Robb chuckled, but there was no joy in it. "I'm not sure if I've survived anything yet." Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. "You made a mistake with Talisa. But you're still a good man. And the North needs a good man more than it needs a perfect king." Robb stared into the flames a moment longer. "Then I'll give them one." The next morning, the Stark host moved out. Thousands marched under the direwolf banners, their footsteps shaking the frozen ground. Ned rode at the front beside Robb, sword at his side, cloak whipping in the cold wind. They reached Harrenhal in 6 days. What they found shocked them. The castle was empty. No soldiers, no banners, no battle. Inside, the walls were scorched. Dead bodies lay rotting in corners. Flies buzzed thick in the air. Some rooms were filled with ashes, others with silence that felt too loud. "They left in a hurry," Ned said, walking through the blackened hall. "Or were driven out." That night, scouts returned with news. Tywin Lannister wasn't waiting at Casterly Rock. He was already marching north, with 3 full armies. And worse, he had allied with the forces of the Vale, thanks to Pater Baelish's poisonous whispers. Sansa Stark, still trapped in the capital, had been married off to Tyrion Lannister. It was a political game, but the damage had already been done. Catelyn's hands shook when she heard. "They used our daughter like a chess piece. She won't be a pawn for long," Ned said. "I swear it, but the night brought darker news. Arya Stark had been spotted alive near the Riverlands, a girl with a sword, traveling with a hound, robbing men, killing Freys in the woods. No one believed it at first, but then came another report and another. Robb smiled for the first time in weeks. "She's alive," he whispered. Ned stared out the window of Harrenhal, fists clenched. "We get her back. We get them all back." But time was running out. Tywin was coming, and he wasn't alone. Snow crunched under the hooves of a stolen horse. Arya Stark pulled her hood low as she rode hard through the woods, her jaw clenched, eyes scanning the trees. The hound, Sandor Clegane, rode behind her, silent, his face bloody and grim as always. They had just ambushed a group of Frey scouts and left none alive. Arya had slit one of their throats herself. Steady hands, cold breath. "No hesitation," he begged, Sandor muttered. "I know," Arya replied. Her voice flat. "You didn't care." "I did once," she said. "Not anymore." She'd heard the rumors. A wolf banner flying over Harrenhal. Stark soldiers in the Riverlands. Her brother alive. Her mother breathing. Her father. No, that couldn't be true. That had to be someone's mistake, but she had to see. So they rode toward Harrenhal. In King's Landing, Sansa stood on a balcony overlooking the city, her hands pale and gripping the stone rail tightly. Tyrion had been kind, more kind than she expected. But it didn't matter. Her soul had already cracked. She wore Lannister red now, not by choice but by force. A golden necklace choked her throat, a symbol of her new loyalty. She hated the taste of every meal. She hated every breath she took inside the Red Keep. And then a whisper reached her ears, from a kitchen girl with shaky hands. "Your father lives. He is with Robb. They took the twins." Sansa blinked, her eyes wide. "What did you say?" The girl looked around nervously. "Your father, Ned Stark, he's alive." The room tilted. Sansa fell back against the wall, her hands trembling. For the first time in years, she felt the burn of hope. Not a foolish dream, a whisper of something real. Later that night, she found Tyrion sitting in their chambers, reading. "You knew, didn't you?" she asked softly. Tyrion looked up. "Yes, and you said nothing. I was protecting you. If Cersei even heard you whisper your father's name, she'd have your tongue torn out." Sansa stared at him. "I don't need your protection. I need my family." Tyrion stood and faced her. "Then we'll find a way, together." At Harrenhal, the wolves were gathering. Robb stood in the yard, watching the northern army drill and train. His cloak flapped behind him, the wind cold and cruel. Grey Wind stood at his side, ears twitching. Then a horn blew at the outer gates. Ned and Catelyn rushed to the walls as riders approached. Dust clouded the air. At first they prepared for battle, but then they saw her Arya, covered in mud, dressed in rags, eyes wild and sharp. She sat tall on the horse, sword at her side, the hound trailing behind her like a shadow. Catelyn cried out first, "Arya!" The gates opened. Arya slid off the horse and ran straight into her mother's arms, burying her face in her chest, sobbing. Ned stood frozen for a second before he moved forward, wrapping them both in his arms. His voice cracked. "You're safe." "Gods, you're safe." Robb arrived moments later, staring at his little sister like a ghost, had returned from the grave. "You've grown," he said with a smile. "You haven't," Arya shot back through tears. Even Grey Wind nudged her shoulder softly. Remembering her scent, the hound stood back, watching the reunion from the shadows, his face unreadable. When Ned noticed him, his hand moved to his sword, but Arya stopped him. "He saved me," she said simply. Ned didn't sheathe his sword, but he gave the hound a slow nod. "Then I owe you a debt." "I didn't do it for you," Sandor grunted. "But I'll collect when the time's right." Then he turned and walked into the yard, accepting the stares of every Stark soldier with a grunt. That night, the castle of Harrenhal was filled with something rare, laughter. Arya ate like a wolf. She told stories of her travels, of the Brotherhood without banners, of killing Freys and surviving Lannister men. But when she spoke of Gendry, her voice cracked. He was taken, sold, gone. Ned promised her quietly, "We'll find him too." But morning brought darker news. A scout returned, his face pale. "Lord Tywin is 2 days away," he said. "And he's not alone. The Vale is with him. Lord Baelish has brought them under Lannister gold." Robb slammed his fist against the map table. "Littlefinger," Ned's face hardened. "He's always been a traitor." "We'll be outnumbered 2-1, said Sir Brynden Blackfish. "Even with Harrenhal's walls, it'll be a siege. Long and bloody." Robb looked at his father. "Then we don't let it become a siege. What do you propose?" "We strike first." Ned raised an eyebrow. Robb stepped forward, pointing to a narrow pass just south of the Lannister route. "We hit them before they reach Harrenhal, before they can set up camp. Catch them marching, tired, unready." "You want to ambush Tywin Lannister?" Ned asked. "I want to kill him." There was silence in the room, then Arya spoke up from the corner. "Do it." Ned stared at both his children, one a king, the other a killer in training. And he knew this was no longer just about honor, it was about survival. He nodded. "Then we ride at dawn." The sun rose blood-red above the riverlands. It cast long shadows across the frost-covered fields, and the wind carried with it the sharp scent of steel and death. Robb Stark mounted his horse in silence. The army behind him was ready, banners rippling in the wind, horses snorting, and thousands of men holding their breath for war. They had moved fast, quietly, through the woods and across the broken hills. Now they waited just beyond a narrow valley, the pass through which Tywin Lannister's army would march. Ned Stark stood beside his son, his face lined with worry. "We strike hard, Robb," he said, "but we don't get reckless. We aren't here for glory. We're here to end this war." Robb nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "I don't want glory. I want Tywin dead." Below them, the valley stretched like a trap. Just one road, flanked by thick woods on both sides. Robb had hidden men in those trees, waiting to rain arrows down on the golden lions when they arrived. As the first lines of Lannister men came into view, armored and proud, Robb raised his sword high in the air. He waited, then dropped it. A war horn blasted across the pass. The sound of thousands of voices followed, screaming, thundering down from the ridges as Stark men charged from the trees. Arrows poured from above like black rain. Horses crashed, men screamed, and the silence of morning was shattered in an instant. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Caught in the middle of a narrow pass, the Lannister soldiers had nowhere to run. The front ranks were trampled by the back, and the back ranks couldn't even see the enemy. Robb's men moved with fury, cold, calculated fury. Ned fought like he had in the rebellion, measured, efficient, always watching Robb, always guarding his flank. He saw his son cut down 3 men in seconds, grey wind leaping beside him like a storm made of teeth, and then a horn blew from the opposite end of the valley. Not a Stark horn, not a Lannister one either. "That's not ours," Ned said sharply. From the north side of the battlefield, a new army poured in. Fresh, armored riders under pale blue banners of the Vale. "The Aryns," someone shouted. "They're supposed to be with the Lannisters." But they weren't charging the Starks, they were charging the Lannisters. The golden lions were crushed between wolves and falcons. Confusion gripped everyone for a moment, until Robb saw him. White horse, a black beard. Pale eyes, Petyr Baelish, riding alongside Lord Jon Royce of the Vale. "What is he doing here?" Robb growled. Ned narrowed his eyes. "Something we're not going to like." After the battle was over, Tywin Lannister was found, alive, barely. Pinned beneath his horse, legs shattered, his red cloak soaked in blood. He refused to scream, even when they pulled him from the wreckage. Just glared at Robb and Ned with eyes that refused to break. "Kill me," he spat. "End it like cowards do." "No," Robb said. "That's too easy for you." They took him prisoner. That night in Harrenhal's hall, Petyr Baelish stood by the fire, sipping wine as if he were the host of a feast. He smiled at Ned and said, "You're welcome." "I didn't ask for your help," Ned said coldly, "but you needed it." "Don't pretend you didn't." Jon Royce stepped forward. "I gave him my word, Stark. He said the Lannisters were planning to betray the Vale, that they would burn the Eyrie after the North." "And you believed him?" Ned asked. Baelish stepped in. "Believe me or not, I delivered you a victory. What do you want, Littlefinger?" Robb asked bluntly. Baelish smiled wider. "Just one thing, Sansa." Ned's face turned to stone. Robb stood up, eyes blazing. "You won't touch my sister." "I don't plan to touch her," Baelish said innocently. "I want to marry her." Ned stepped forward, hand on his sword. "Over my dead body." Baelish didn't flinch. "If that's what it takes." Before blood could spill, Catelyn burst into the hall, face pale. "There's a raven." "From King's Landing." "It's Sansa." Ned grabbed the letter. His eyes scanned it quickly, then again. The paper shook in his hand. "She's escaped." "What?" Robb said. "With Tyrion's help," Catelyn added. "They fled the city 3 nights ago. No one knows where they are." Baelish's calm mask cracked for a second. His eyes turned cold. "She was mine." "No," Arya said from the shadows. "She's not anyone's." Everyone turned. She stepped forward, needle at her hip, eyes sharp and dark. "She's free now." "Like me." Ned looked from one daughter to the other. For the first time in years, both his girls were alive and fighting. "Then we find her," Ned said. "Before anyone else does?" But Baelish just smiled to himself and walked away, muttering, "She'll come to me eventually. They always do. That night, as Robb stared into the fire, Grey Wind restless beside him, he asked quietly, "Do you trust him?" Ned answered without looking. "No, but he's not the threat right now." "Then who is?" Ned didn't answer, because deep down he already knew someone in their own camp was betraying them. Rain fell hard over Harrenhal. Thick cold drops hit the stone walls like drumbeats of war. In the darkness of early morning, thunder rolled across the skies, but it wasn't just the storm brewing. Inside the war tent, Ned Stark couldn't sleep. He paced slowly, listening to the wind howl through the ruined towers. Something was wrong. His instincts, sharpened from years of war and silence, screamed. That danger was near. He wasn't wrong. A scream cut through the courtyard, then another, then the sound of steel. Ned burst from his tent with sword drawn. Just as fire exploded near the stables, Robb came running from the opposite side, half-armored, Grey Wind snarling beside him. "What's happening?" Robb shouted. "An attack?" "Nope." Ned looked around. "It's inside. This is sabotage." Then they saw him, Roose Bolton, walking calmly through the chaos, covered in blood that wasn't his. Behind him, Stark soldiers lay dying, some stabbed from behind, others poisoned, their lips black and cracked. He walked toward them with slow, deliberate steps, and in his hand was a folded parchment, sealed with a red lion. "A gift," Roose said. "From House Lannister." Ned's face twisted with rage. "You betrayed your king," Roose shrugged. "He was never my king. The North belongs to the strong, and strength doesn't follow boys who cry over dead wolves." Before Ned could answer, Arya appeared from the shadows. Silent, small, deadly. She threw her knife. It caught Bolton's shoulder, deep. He growled in pain and turned, but before he could react, Grey Wind lunged. His massive jaws clamped down on Roose Bolton's throat, crushing it in a single, brutal snap. The man didn't even scream, just twitched and died. Silence followed. Then a cry of alarm rose from the outer walls. "The prisoners! Tywin has escaped!" Robb's eyes widened. "No, how?" The answer came quickly. Baelish. He was gone. His tent was empty. His guards were dead. His deal with the Vale, fake from the start. He had come not to help Robb win the war, but to help Tywin survive it. They had all been played, far to the east, across the muddy trails of the Crownlands. Sansa Stark rode hard through the woods, her hair soaked with rain. Tyrion Lannister rode beside her, quiet, his sword drawn. Neither had slept in days. Behind them were gold cloaks and bounty hunters, sent by Cersei herself. "You should leave me," Sansa said, voice shaking. "They want me, not you." Tyrion gave a bitter laugh. "You think they'll let the imp walk free after helping you escape? I'd rather die running than die kneeling." Sansa looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time not as a Lannister but as a man. "You didn't have to help me. I know." "Then why?" Tyrion sighed. "Because when you looked at me, you didn't see a monster. And that's more than my own family ever gave me." A shout rose in the distance. They were close. Tyrion cursed and kicked his horse harder. "We keep moving." Back at Harrenhal, the fires were out, but the cost was heavy. Dozens of northern men dead. Some poisoned, others murdered in their sleep. Roose Bolton had been working with Baelish for weeks, feeding him troop movements, security gaps, and secrets. Robb stared at the map with empty eyes. He knew everything. "And we didn't see it." Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. "We trusted too easily," Robb nodded. "Never again." But Ned didn't answer, because the pain in his chest wasn't just about betrayal. It was about Sansa, still missing, still hunted. And worst of all, Baelish now had Tywin, and likely already rode for King's Landing. Arya entered the room, boots muddy, hands dirty. "I want to go after her," she said firmly. "Sansa?" Ned asked. She nodded. "I'm faster than a whole army. I can slip through woods, towns, whatever it takes." "You're just a girl," Robb said. "I'm not a girl anymore," she snapped. "I'm a Stark, and you need me out there more than here." Robb looked at their father. Ned hesitated, torn between fear and pride. "You'll take 2 guards," he said finally. "And Ghost?" Arya smiled. "I'll bring her home." As she turned to leave, Ned whispered, "And come home yourself." That night, Robb stood alone at the battlements. His hands were stained with blood, and his eyes burned with exhaustion. He had won a battle, lost a traitor, but peace was still far away. Catelyn joined him quietly. "You're not the boy I raised," she said. "I can't afford to be," Robb replied. She rested a hand on his shoulder. "No crown is worth your soul." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "But what is the North worth?" Before she could answer, a raven landed beside them. Its message carried only one line: "Daenerys Targaryen sails for Westeros." The shoreline of Blackwater Bay shimmered under the grey morning sky. Ships rocked in the choppy tide, their sails black and red. A three-headed dragon flapped proudly on every mast. At the center of the fleet stood a single great ship, her decks crowded with Unsullied, her prow carved like a dragon's maw, and standing at the front of it, Daenerys Targaryen. Her silver hair blew behind her as she stared toward the coast of Westeros. This was not the home she remembered in stories. This was not the warm place Viserys used to whisper about. This land was wounded, loud, cruel, but it would be hers. "Is the raven sent to the north?" she asked quietly. "Yes, your grace," Missandei said, "and they know I come not as conqueror, but as queen." "They know," Jorah added beside her, "but that may not matter. The north remembers, but not always fondly." Daenerys narrowed her eyes. "Then we'll give them a choice. Bend the knee, or be burned." Hundreds of miles away, Arya crouched in the woods, one hand on needle, the other holding her breath. Her eyes scanned the road. Dust swirled ahead. She saw 3 riders, bounty hunters armed with cruel smiles on their faces, and between them, chained, was Sansa. Her sister looked weak, pale, hair tangled. But she was alive. Arya signaled to the 2 guards she brought, and to Ghost, who growled low behind her. "Don't kill the leader," she said. "He talks." They struck with speed and fury. The guards took the left and right. Ghost slammed into the largest one with a sound like thunder. Arya herself moved straight for the leader. Needle slid into his thigh before he could draw his sword. He collapsed, screaming, as Arya pressed the blade to his neck. Sansa stared at her, stunned, chained, not believing what she saw. "Arya," she whispered. Arya didn't speak. She just smiled and slit the leader's throat anyway. Sansa ran to her as the guards broke her chains. They hugged like they never thought they would again. At Harrenhal, Robb Stark stood at the war table as another raven arrived. He broke the seal, read the message, and looked up at his father. "She's here." Ned didn't ask who, they both knew. Daenerys Targaryen, dragons, armies, ships. She's landed at Dragonstone. Catelyn paled. "Another war?" Ned frowned. "Or an alliance." Robb slammed his fist down. "We've barely survived Lannisters and traitors. Now another Targaryen wants to play queen? She might not want to fight us," Ned reasoned. "She was born in Westeros. She has no reason to hate the North." "Everyone wants something," Robb muttered. A voice from the door made them all turn. "She wants the throne. That means she wants you gone." It was Baelish. Somehow he had returned, flanked by guards in veil armor, smiling as if nothing had happened. He walked into the hall like he still belonged. "You should be dead," Robb growled. Baelish shrugged. "You keep letting me live, Stark. That's your first mistake." Ned drew his sword. "Why are you here?" "To offer a solution," Baelish said. "You can't fight dragons. You don't have wildfire. You don't have Euron's navy. You barely have unity. And what do you offer?" Robb spat. "A marriage," Baelish said, smiling. "Sansa. She's my claim to the north." Before Robb could speak, a knife flew through the air. Baelish's smug smile disappeared as Arya stepped out from the shadows, her hand still outstretched. Sansa followed behind her, eyes cold and locked on Baelish. "You don't get to speak my name," she said. Baelish laughed nervously. "Sansa, you don't understand." Arya was already walking, quiet, deadly. "You betrayed our father. You sold my sister. You gave our brother's killers a place to hide. And now you think you get to walk in here like a savior?" Baelish backed up. "No trial?" he asked. Sansa stepped forward beside Arya. "We're not in the south anymore." And Arya drove needle into his heart. No one moved. No one stopped her. He fell to the cold stone floor, gasping, gurgling, and then he was gone. Just another ghost in Harrenhal's halls. That night, in the high tower, the Starks met for the first time in peace. Robb, Arya, Sansa, Ned, Catelyn, Bran's name carved into the table. Rickon's memory hanging over them like a shadow. "We've lost too much," Robb said. "But the war is not over. Daenerys may not be our enemy," Ned offered. Sansa shook her head. "She's been taught to believe that fire solves everything. But fire only burns. We've seen enough of that." Arya leaned back. "We can't kneel again. Not to a crown, not to a dragon." Robb looked at his family, then stood. "Then we send a raven. One chance. Come north, speak with us, queen to king. If she refuses..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need too far away. Daenerys stood in the map room of Dragonstone, reading the raven, a note from the north, an invitation. She looked at Jorah, then at Tyrion, who had rejoined her after fleeing with Sansa. "She's strong," Tyrion said. "Stubborn, but she listens." Daenerys stared at the paper a long time, then whispered, "Then I will go, alone." "Alone?" Tyrion asked. "I need them to see me. Not my army, not my dragons, me." A week later, in the godswood of Harrenhal, under the old heart tree, Ned Stark stood waiting. The snow was falling again, footsteps echoed softly, and then, through the trees, came a woman in a black cloak, silver hair flowing like moonlight. Daenerys Targaryen. The wolf and the dragon stood face to face, not enemies, not allies, not yet, just two survivors of broken houses, staring down the future. And the future for once was quiet.